Hello, hello. Continuing in the series of talking about all sorts of things that I love, not just books. Um, we've got the results from this thing that was going around on Twitter a couple weeks ago that I had done and then kind of forgot about and then remembered and thought, oh, it would be a good thing to do a video on, fun thing to talk about. And that was make a 3x3, which is 3x3s, 4x4s, 5x5s are common in online music communities, but they apply to other things as well, where you just make an image of the covers of 3x3, so 9 total things. And this was 3x3 of the video games that define who you are. Not the best video games of all time, not necessarily even your favorite video games of all time, but the games that define who you are. Um, I thought that was a very interesting thing, and I did it, and I had a really hard time narrowing it down to 9. Um, Video games have been a huge part of my life for my whole life, and I had to leave some things off this list that hurt my soul to leave off. First, I limited myself to one game per series, and that some really great stuff hit the cutting room floor because of that. But then even beyond that, things like Shadow of the Colossus did not make it on this list. Something like Half-Life 2 did not make it onto this list. Something like Fallout 2 did not make it to this list. There are a lot of Planescape Torment, tons of games that I love that did not end up on this list. But what I have, I think, is a good representation of me and what I like in games and what I think games are capable of. Some of the games on this list are incredibly popular. Some of the games on this list are not super popular. Some of them, people might argue, shouldn't count as a game. Maybe. And the oldest one was released 30 years ago in 1991, and the most recent one was released just last year in 2020. And I'm going to go through them in chronological order rather than trying to rank them by favoritist. I'll go through them with the oldest first and then moving forward to the newest, and I'll tell you a little bit about them. I'll tell you why I love them, and then I'll tell you how easy or hard they will be for you to play, because a lot of the times games are tied to hardware, and hardware goes out of date, and it can make it hard to play them. So first, we have one of the most popular and ubiquitous video game series in the history of video games, and we have 1991's The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo. And I am going to be using American release dates for these games. Just to be clear, that'll be more relevant later in the list, because there's one on this list that took a long time for it to come to America. So, Link to the Past. The classic go-to answer for best Zelda game is Ocarina of Time, the first one for the Nintendo 64. In recent years, the cool kids have started saying that Majora's Mask, the other Nintendo 64 one, is the best. In even more recent years, the most recent version of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, which was released simultaneously for the Wii U and the Switch, is often now being said to be the best Zelda. But my favorite Zelda game is Link to the Past, which is the fourth game in the Zelda series after Zelda, Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link for the NES, and then Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening for the Game Boy. This was the final console 2D Zelda. There have been many 2D Zeldas since, but they are all for handheld systems. And it is, I think, this was the pinnacle of 2D Zelda. I think that they really, everything they did afterwards was just trying to iterate upon this, where they really perfected it. And so, every Zelda game is kind of follows the same structure. For the most part, you've got to, go to around the map various dungeons. Each dungeon will have a boss. Defeating the boss will earn you some sort of trinket or award or relic or something, and during the dungeon you will usually get a new item that you can equip that will give you a new mechanic that the dungeon is usually centered around, and then the game revolves around you going to a certain number of dungeons, and then after you complete all of them you go to a final dungeon where Ganon or Ganondorf, the villain of the series, will be, and then you fight him, and then you win the game, you get the Triforce, etc., you save Princess Zelda, whatever. And this is, follows that pretty much. But this one introduces an interesting mechanic where there are two worlds, and one is sort of like the shadow world, where you, halfway through the game, you acquire this magic mirror that allows you to instantaneously transport yourself from one world to the other. And the maps and locations and things are all the same, but in the dark world, everything is sort of different and bad and, hellish and nightmarish. And the tone of the game is really great. I think it really has a great voice and presence. It introduced a lot of long-running mechanics and things that have become staples of the series. And maybe it's not as good of a game as Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask or Breath of the Wild, but it was one of the first games that I remember really blowing my mind when I was very young, 6 or 7 years old, before Ocarina of Time came out. And so I've got that association with it. It is the definitive sort of game of my early childhood, I think. And it's a great game. It's a fantastic experience. And if you've never played a Zelda game, I think you could do much worse than starting with this one. This game is available currently as part of if you have a Nintendo Switch and you sign up for their online service, Nintendo Switch Online, it allows you access to a number of classic games for the NES and the SNES, and among the SNES games, this is one of them. So if you have a Switch and you sign up for that service, which I think is $4 a month or something like that, or $20 for a year, that will grant you access to play this game on your Switch. Second game on my list is the game that for most of my life I have thought of as my favorite, and I don't anymore. And I do, I have talked before about how maybe having a favorite isn't something that I feel super strongly about in a lot of ways anymore, but I do have a game that surpassed it, and we'll get to it later. But this is a game that in 1996 was released in the United States under the name Earthbound for the Super Nintendo, right at the very tail end of the Super Nintendo's lifetime, which kind of doomed it to failure. It was a commercial failure and sold very poorly. Earthbound, of course, was the English version of a Japanese game called Mother 2, sequel to Mother for the NES, which was never released in America. It has subsequently been released more recently digitally. And then, of course, there was a follow-up 10 years after Mother 2, Mother 3, which was also never released in America, but has been very heavily, famously fan-translated, and widely pirated and played in English-speaking worlds, despite Nintendo's refusal to officially bring the game to outside of Japan. So Earthbound is a RPG, a JRPG, and in a lot of ways it is very similar to the classic JRPGs of its time, your Dragon Warriors and your Final Fantasies, but it has a very distinct and unique flavor to it. So it is set in a country called Eagle Land that is a very obvious satire and parody of the United States. And you play as a group of psychic children who are called upon by a time-traveling bee to save the world from an intergalactic warlord who is going to take over Earth. And since you're children, of course, you have to fight with things like frying pans and baseball bats and shoot bottle rockets. And the enemies that you fight, instead of being, monsters of traditional fantasy, you'll be fighting New Age hippies or, piles of goo, or maybe a dog, or maybe you'll be fighting a Salvador Dali painting, or a fire hydrant, or a parking meter, or maybe a big ass mole rat, who's the third most powerful mole rat in this dungeon, he swears. Even though there are 8, and all 8 of them are very certain that they are the third most powerful. This game has a very, very unique, distinct sense of humor that permeates the entire game. One of the great joys of this game is just getting to go through the world and talk to all of the people in it and see what they say, because it is just always so funny and enjoyable to do so. This game, I will say, I've played this game. As far as hours put into a game, I think the only thing that I've ever played more than this is probably the original Pokemon Blue, which does not make this list, though I played that game a lot. But there are things about this game that show its age. Optimization things that quality of life things that could be improved upon that you miss, because this is an old game from before people figured out better ways to do things for a lot of stuff. Inventory management in this game is kind of a nightmare. The money system is thematic, but also very annoying, where all of the money that you get from fights is deposited by your dad into a bank account, and you have to go to an ATM and retrieve it in order to take it then to a store to spend it. So it's like adding this extra step to everything. Whatever. I will say that this game doesn't have the most intricate and nuanced and important story necessarily. It's a game that's much more about characters and tone and things like that than it is about like a plot. but it is still very good and very funny. And people are generally pretty familiar with Ness, who is the protagonist of this game, because he's in the Super Smash games, and he's been in all the Super Smash games, going back to the first one. Yeah, I implore you to track this one down and play it. So in terms of playing this game legally, because most people don't have a Super Nintendo, and if you do, getting a copy of this game is going to cost you at minimum around $300 or more. This was released on the Nintendo eShop stores for the Wii U console, and then the Virtual Console for the new 3DS, specifically. Not the regular 3DS, the new 3DS, specifically. And then also it is included as part of the SNES Classic, the little tiny SNES console that you could get for $100, that had a bunch of games on it. And it is on there. So, those are options. I'm not saying that you should go emulate this game for free. Or am I? Let's move forward to 1998. A little PC game from a little guy named Tim Schafer. It's The Grim Fandango, the story of Manny Calavera in the Afterworld.
Buenos días. Everybody here is just as dead as you. That's why we call it the land of the dead.
Manny, what are you doing here?
I wanted to see how your trip was going, Angel. I am your travel agent, you know. I could have walked faster than this. Híjole, I'm gonna miss the poisoning.
Cut the yap. I want something cheap where I can get some rest, and that's it. If you haven't bagged a premium before the next sales report comes in, you're out!
Guess they couldn't save me, huh?
No, but there's still a chance you could save me. I was once a reaper like yourself, Manuel. But I uncovered a web of corruption in our beloved Department of Death.
Hector, no!
Looks like I've got one of your boys down here in the morgue.
Tell me, Manny, would I have had a chance?
You gotta watch your step around here, stranger. Rubicabe ain't the quaint little port town she used to be.
I've got to get back to the city where the action is.
Manuel, are you in love with her? Love? Love is for the living, Sal. I'm only after her for one reason. She's my ticket out of here.
I'm getting out of here. This world's for suckers.
So this was a game by Tim Schafer, who started out as a writer and designer on Day of the Tentacle, and then was a major contributor to the first couple Monkey Island games before he got his first crack at directing a game. He made so these are point-and-click adventure games LucasArts games from the 90s, the heyday of point and click adventure games. And then he made another point and click game called Full Throttle. It was very good. And then he followed that up with this one, his final game for LucasArts, The Grim Fandango, which is a adventure game, but it is not point and click. It's 3D models in a static rendered environment, and it functions basically like a point and click game, but you're controlling the character with like tank controls. And so the game is about, it takes place in the Land of the Dead, the Dios de los Muertos world from Mexican culture, and you play as Manny Calavera, who is a dead man who is a travel salesman. When people arrive in the afterworld, they are judged for their sins or how they lived their life, and depending on how good they were in life, that affords them different options for how they spend their time traveling through the land of the dead to reach the final destination and move on to the final afterlife. And so since Manny was really bad in life, he's stuck in this dead-end job selling people travel packages. But then when he uncovers this conspiracy in his job, where he finds out that people who deserve better packages are having their trips stolen from them and then sold off to rich people instead. And in part of uncovering this, he finds this woman who he falls in love with, who has her trip taken away from her. The rest of the game then follows him chasing after her across the land of the dead, trying to right his wrongs and bring the bad guys to justice. Schafer is known for being very funny, having very funny games. I mentioned all those ones before. His more recent stuff would be like Psychonauts, which was his follow-up to this, and Brutal Legend with Jack Black, and then most recently he did do Psychonauts 2 just a few months ago. This game, I think, really, it has like everything that you want from something like this in it, where it's the tone and the style and the world is so interesting and cool and fun, and the writing is really good. It's really funny, but it also strikes a balance of being very serious and philosophical and poignant. It's paced really brilliantly. It's split into like 4 chapters. Each chapter is sort of a different set piece where you are dropped. A period of time will pass between each chapter, and then you are dropped into this new area that you have to explore and figure out how to get beyond to move to the next section of the game. It's got really great, memorable, hilarious characters, and is just so smart and fun. And this was a huge failure when it came out. It sold terribly, and nobody bought it, and Tim Schafer left LucasArts, and then LucasArts, because of this, quit making point-and-click games, quit making adventure games. Tim Schafer founded Double Fine, and has gone on to have plenty of success after his LucasArts time. Originally, when this game came out, shortly after this game came out, I bought it. It was a PC game, and I bought it at Best Buy for $2 on clearance. That is how little people cared about this game. And it kind of languished on PC for many years until in the mid-2010s they did an HD remaster of it and ported it to consoles and re-released it on Steam and everything with a bunch of quality of life improvements. You can just use regular directional controls instead of tank controls if you choose to, and they streamlined the inventory management and things like that to make it more user-friendly. So the remastered version of the game is available digitally on Steam, on PC, as well as on PlayStation 4, and has also, as of 2018, it was released digitally on the Switch as well. So you have plenty of options for how you can play this game if you should so choose to do so. And you should. It's absolutely great. You probably want to use a walkthrough because some of the puzzles are a little... That's how adventure games were back then, right? The puzzles aren't intuitive, usually, right? And you'll save yourself a lot of frustration and banging your head against the wall if you just use a walkthrough to do it. Or maybe don't just use the walkthrough, but have it handy in case you can't figure out what to do, because it can be, frustrating. And you don't... That's no fun. No one likes that. Moving into the 21st century, we have the first, game that I think people... This is a game that is going to get tossed around a lot in conversations about greatest games ever made. The other ones that I've talked about before are all games that people like a lot, but this one is, one that people really like. And that is Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater for the PlayStation 2 from the year 2004. So, the Metal Gear Solid series of 7 core games, Metal Gear series, there were 2 Metal Gears and then 5 Metal Gear Solids. They were all designed, written, directed by a man named Hideo Kojima, who is generally thought of as, one of the most visionary, auteur-like, gonzo, weirdo geniuses in the history of video games. People call him Kubrickian. I think that's a fair assessment. And Metal Gear was his magnum opus, right? He designed a couple of other adventure games in the 80s, and most recently he had a very public and unfortunate falling out with Konami, the publisher of Metal Gear, and left the company and left the series, and seemingly left the final Metal Gear Solid 5 unfinished, at least partially. And Konami owns Metal Gear, so they are continuing to make games without him, which not great. And he moved on. He made a game called Death Stranding, which came out in 2019 to sort of mixed reviews. I liked it, but I can see why people didn't. But Metal Gear Solid is, the thing he's known for, and I think the consensus is at this point pretty much that 3 is the best one, and I agree. And so, talking about Metal Gear Solid, it's hard not to ramble on a lot. It's a very epic, huge story, 7 games that take place over the course of 60 years, and are not chronological, and feature various, 3 different player characters, which is kind of a spoiler for the 5th one, but that game came out 6 years ago. It's okay. But so, in the first 2 Metal Gears, and then Metal Gear Solid, you play 4 player characters. I'm sorry. Those 3 games, you play as Solid Snake, who is a Special Forces operative, stealth operative, And the story of the series is, I'll try and boil it down as much as possible because it's extremely complicated and convoluted and weird. But basically, in the setup for the first Metal Gear Solid, there's this ex-Special Forces sort of terrorist guy, Big Boss, who was the villain in the Metal Gear games, and you kill him in Metal Gear Solid. You've got this group of terrorists called Foxhound that have taken control of this nuclear weapons disposal facility in Alaska, where they have taken control of a Metal Gear, which is a type of bipedal robot that can shoot nuclear missiles, and they are threatening to nuke America unless they are given the corpse of Big Boss. That's the setup for the first game. Second game opens with a prologue where you play as Solid Snake, and then he seemingly may disappear. And then the rest of the game you're playing as a new agent who's working for the same agency that Solid Snake did, named Raiden. Snake does eventually return to the game, but not as a player character. And so these games are all about secret societies and conspiracies and government agencies and the Cold War and the big ideas of war and the implications of war and what it means to be a soldier. But they're very tender. They're very weird. The original Metal Gear Solid famously featured a nemesis named Psycho Mantis, who would do things like read your memory card to tell you the games that you had played and break the fourth wall. And he would do things like disable the controller slot, and you'd have to unplug your controller and then plug it into a different slot on the console in order to keep fighting him. It did things like there was a point where you had to use your radio to call a person, but you didn't know what their number was, and the solution, how you figured it out, was that it was on the box. It was on the back of the box of the game. Just things that no one had ever thought of or done before. That just totally like redefined what a game could be or do. And that's a thing that Kojima does a lot. He's able to really sort of push the boundaries and innovate what a game can be and what a game is capable of, and that's what I love about him.
I've been waiting, Snake, for a long time. Waiting for your birth, your growth, and the finality of today.
Boss, why are you doing this?
Why? To make the world one again.
To put it simply, in order to avoid a full-scale nuclear conflict, we have to prove that America was not involved in that explosion.
And eliminating the boss ourselves will prove America's innocence?
You're the only one capable of pulling this off. You were her last apprentice.
I'm not a hired killer.
I'm not your boss anymore.
Why'd you defect?
I didn't. I'm loyal to the end, to my purpose. What about you, Jack? Loyalty to your country or loyalty to me? Your duty to your unit or your personal feelings?
You've got to do it, Snake. She's your enemy and your objective.
Enemy? We were together for 10 years, and now you tell me she's my enemy?
I raised you. I loved you. I've given you weapons, taught you techniques, endowed you with knowledge. There is nothing more for me to give you. All that's left for you to take is my life. By your own hand. One must die, and one must live. The one who survives will inherit the title of boss. And the one who inherits the title of boss will face an existence of endless battle.
Snake, is there anyone you like?
I've never been interested in other people's lives.
You were interested in the boss. What's the story between you and the boss?
She was like a mother, and my master.
And your lover?
It went deeper than that. Half of me belongs to the boss.
Do you love her?
No, nothing like that.
Do you hate her?
Does it have to be one or the other? Love or hate?
Between a man and a woman? You bet.
For 10 years, we lived and died together. You couldn't possibly understand.
And you think you can kill her now? That's your mission, isn't it? Assassinating the boss.
The world was once one. We will heal that rift and make the world whole again. To do this, we need strength. An unstoppable trump card with enough power to bring order to the world. That trump card was to be the Shagohod and the Cobra unit.
And Metal Gear Solid 3, after 4 games about Solid Snake set in the mostly current day, we go back to the 1960s and we play as Naked Snake, who is, of course, actually Big Boss before he is known as Big Boss, the father of Solid Snake. Solid Snake is a clone of Big Boss, as well as Liquid Snake, his brother. There's a whole thing where Liquid Snake dies, and then there's a guy, Revolver Ocelot, who got his arm cut off, and then they take Liquid Snake's arm and fuse it onto Revolver Ocelot, but then Liquid Snake's personality can take over Revolver Ocelot, but only when Solid Snake is nearby. But these games get really weird. So Metal Gear Solid 3, Naked Snake's mentor, the boss, who's a woman, operative, has defected from the American government, and nobody understands why or what's happening. And it's up to Naked Snake to go out into the jungle and track her down and get some answers and probably take her out. And this game has some really incredible innovations in its gameplay. The games are stealth-based, largely stealth-based combat games. And then this one introduced a lot more intricate things like camouflaging and stuff where you're blending in with the jungle foliage in really interesting ways. And it has some of the most iconic and memorable moments from gaming in my history of playing video games. The battle with the boss known as the End, who is an elderly man who is the greatest sniper in the world, is one of the most interesting boss battles in video game history, I think. And there's a sequence in the game that people refer to as the ladder sequence, which I can describe to you as being a section in the game where you climb a incredibly long ladder for a very long time, and a song plays in the background, and it sounds like whatever, but it's one of the most affecting, emotional moments I've ever experienced in a game. It's just such an odd and brilliant microcosm that is indescribable, truly. I cannot express how that scene makes me feel. So, Metal Gear, maybe a little impenetrable because they are iterative. You need to play them in order, or else you're not going to know what's going on. And on top of, even if you do, they're very convoluted and hard to follow. I will say that you can probably get away with not playing the original 2 Metal Gear games and just reading like a synopsis of what happens in them. But I do think that you should go back and play starting with the first Metal Gear Solid if you intend to experience the games. All 5 of them are amongst the greatest games ever made. I think without question. I just happen to think 3 is the best one. And the first 3, the best ways to play them, there isn't a great way to play them on modern hardware. So the first 3, the first one was a PS1 game, and then 2 and 3 were PS2 games, 4 was a PS3 game, and 5 was a PS4 game and Xbox One. The Metal Gear Solid HD Collection was released for the Xbox 360 and the PS3, which contains the first 3 Metal Gear Solid games. And that is, if you have a PS3 or a 360, there you go. Otherwise, if you have a PS4, if you get PlayStation Now, the streaming on-demand game service that PlayStation offers for like $10 a month, that is one of the games on that service, so you can play it that way. Otherwise, that's it. And then Metal Gear Solid 4 has never left the PS3. You have to go get a PS3 to play it. That is your only legal choice. And then Metal Gear Solid 5, of course, is on the PS4 and the Xbone, and I think that they made, yeah, and those are backwards compatible with the Series S, X, and the PS5. So, yeah. So if you want to play the older ones, I'm not saying that emulation is the best option, but it is. Moving forward a few years to 2008. Shin Megami Tensei Persona 4. What did I just say? Sounded like a bunch of gibberish. Well, it's not. Shin Megami Tensei is a long-running series of JRPGs dating back to the early 90s, I believe, is when they first started. And there is a core series, Shin Megami Tensei 1 through 5. 5 is coming out in the near future. But within that, there are a ton of spin-off series. And the most famous spin-off series, so famous that it's more famous than the main series, is Persona. Generally, people don't say Shin Megami Tensei Persona. They just say Persona 4. So Persona 1 and 2 were released for the PS1, and they were like, people liked them, but they were whatever. And then Persona 3 came out for the PS2 in the late 2000s, 2006 or 7, I want to say. And then Persona 4 came out in 2008. And those quickly, they grew and grew and grew in cult stature, and people really loved those games a lot. And then there was a very long wait for Persona 5, which finally released in the spring of 2017. One of my most eagerly anticipated game releases of all time. And Persona 5 was this big commercial success, surprise success, crossed over and sold a ton of copies. In a way that I was very surprised and very happy about, because I hold the Persona series very dear to my heart. And Persona 5, I think most people think that it's the best one. At this point, I think most people have only played Persona 5. And I played 3 and 4 in like the early 2010s, like 2012, 2013 or so. And then, spent 5 years eagerly waiting for the follow-up. And I'm here to say that 4 is my favorite. And I think that all 3 of them are fantastic, among my favorites of all time, and absolutely worth your time, worth playing, no question. And I think that playing 5 first is completely valid, and I think that people who think that 5 is the best one are completely justified in saying so, because in a lot of ways it is. But for me, there's something about the 4th one that just is my favorite.
Of diets, enough with going to the gym. Good thing there's something even I can handle.
Tonight, Princess Yukiko has a big surprise. The scandal involves the Enkastar Misuzu Hiragi.
I face up, I hold up, I reach up to the truth. All my life seems all the whole moment to now break away. Oh, but let me out, can you let me out? Can you set me free from this that in the world safe? In the last beat, in the
So the Persona games are this very interesting blend of high school life sim, dating sim, open world style, and JRPG turn-based dungeon crawler, horror, surreal, nightmare, kind of Pokemon almost like game. Sounds like it wouldn't work, but it really works. Basically, in each game you take on the role of a silent protagonist who is a high school student in modern Japan, and you have to live your day-to-day life. You go to school every day. You wake up, it's a new day. It follows a calendar. On weekdays you're going to school, every Sunday you have the day off. You go to class, you maybe have to answer some questions about topics that you're learning about. In some of the games you're going to be joining after school activity groups and going and doing that, and then you're going to be making friends, other students around the school or people around the town. You can get a part-time job. All these different life sim type of things. And, there's more to do than you can do in one run-through. And you have to choose what to prioritize. And then the point of doing this is that through making friends, through some people you just are friends, some girls, because you're a male protagonist, girls you can enter relationships with. So it's got sort of light dating sim stuff going on. But as you befriend people and you level up your relationship, each person represents a different arcana of the tarot. And the better you get to know people and befriend them, the higher you level up your friendship, your social link. They're referred to as social links. And it's really interesting because you get to know these characters progressively. You start as strangers, and by the end you're lifelong friends, and it feels really satisfying to peel back the layers and learn who these characters are, right? And some of them are your party members, some of them are not, and some, it depends. But then in each game, in various ways, there is some sort of otherworldly threat that you are going to have to battle alongside your friends from school, where you will be going to a sort of different world where there are monsters, sort of shadow versions of people of the real world, and then you will use the power known as the persona to battle them. And so each of your party members will have a persona that is their own personal persona, sort of like a Pokemon, and then you as the main character have the ability to wield multiple personas. And so there are different types of persona that have different types of move, and then you can also do persona fusion to combine them into new personas and collect all the personas, like Pokemon, like I said. And the social links that you get during the daytime directly correlates to how strong your personas will be when you create and fuse them of that Arcana type in the Dungeon Crawler section of the game. The way that the sort of nuance is handled in each game is interesting. In Persona 3, it's like at midnight, there's like an hour where time stops for everyone except for select people, and then these shadow monsters come out. Persona 3, the stylistic, sort of like visual style of the world is like my favorite of the series. There's this thing that when you summon your persona, in 4 and 5, it's sort of whatever, you just summon your persona. In Persona 3, they use these things called evokers, which are guns. They look like pistols. And in order to summon your persona, you take the gun and you shoot yourself in the head. And then the persona sort of erupts from your brain, which is, very evocative, and I love that image a lot. In Persona 4, there's this sort of world inside of television that is where the sort of battle will take place, and that game is not about like a world-threatening like the third one is about like end of the world stuff. The fourth one is about a serial killer, and it takes place in a small town, and it's a mystery. There's a serial killer plaguing the town who is killing people by taking them from the real world and then bringing them into the TV world where they are then killed. And then it is up to you and your ability and your friend's ability to traverse the TV world to hunt down the killer and unmask them and stop them. And then the fifth one is framed in the way where you are caught at the opening of the game committing a heist where you are stealing someone's heart. And you spend the whole game in an interrogation room, and the game is told in flashback as you get through everything that has led up to that moment, where you are basically trying to make the world better by finding people whose hearts are corrupt and going into this shadow world where these corrupt people have sort of a thing that's referred to as a palace that is like a dungeon that represents their psyche, and you have to traverse it in a sort of heist style to steal their heart, which is basically to forcibly make them have a change of heart and become a better person. But 4 is my favorite. I like the serial killer story a lot. I think the characters in 4 are the strongest. I don't know where my pants are, but my keys, I have a keychain of Chie Satonaka, one of the characters from Persona 4, that I bought at Eagle Anime, which is a store that used to exist at the Mall of America. And I've had that keychain on my keys for a long time, like 6 years, and it hasn't broken or come off yet. This is just like such goodness, such an intense amount of goodness, and these games are long. Persona 3 and 4 are like 40 to 50 hour games, and Persona 5 is like a 80 to 100 hour game. It's a lot. But I've played through Persona 4 twice, despite it being that long. It is that good. Persona 4 was originally released for the PS2, and then a remaster with added stuff called Persona 4 Golden was released for the PS Vita a few years later. However, just recently, Persona 4 Golden was ported to the PC. So you can get Persona 4 Golden on Steam right now and play it. And it's great. Or you can get Persona 5. It's on the PS4. And Persona 5 Royal, which is the sort of expanded, revised, updated version, is out there as well. I have not played that yet, but probably will someday. And if you fall into the world of Persona, there is so much spin-off and merch and goodies to be had. It's quite fun. Next is the first thing on this list that is probably going to be controversial. It's a game that is not well liked, and that is Beyond Two Souls from 2013 from developer Quantic Dream, the studio led by David Cage, the visionary French game designer. So Quantic Dream and David Cage are known for making games that are sort of styled as interactive movies more than games. They are very cinematic in their presentation, and they rely less on gameplay than they do on decision-making and branching storylines to give you a sort of choose-your-own-adventure style of narrative with different, conclusions depending on how you play the game. Their first game was Omicron the Nomad Soul for the Dreamcast in the late 90s. Then they had some mild success with their game Fahrenheit, which was released in the United States as Indigo Prophecy for the PS2 and the Xbox. But then they really hit it big with their PS3 exclusive Heavy Rain, which was a game about a man whose son is hit by a car and dies, and then his other son is still alive, but his life is kind of ruined because of his son dying, but then a serial killer kidnaps his son, his living son, and he is forced to undergo a series of brutal challenges to prove his love for his son in order to rescue him from this serial killer. And that game is really good. Like that game a lot. But then he and Quantic Dream followed it up with this game, Beyond: Two Souls.
I found you by the side of the road, in the middle of nowhere. Was there an accident? Did someone try to hurt you? Is that a scar? Is that recent?
I know. They're coming. Ever since I was born, I've been linked to an entity. His name is Aiden, and he's always with me.
We can find a way to protect you. The agency wants you to join their military school program.
Come on! Have a gun on me!
They know what you and Aiden can do.
Watch yourself out there, Jody. I don't want anything to happen to you.
Just say nothing, you hear me?
Something happened last night, but they know only you know how to deal with what lies beyond the rift.
They've opened a passage? To Aiden's world?
Good God, Jody, what's happening?
I don't think I'm gonna make it.
That's her! That's her! She's getting away!
Jody, what have you done?
Tell them to leave me the fuck alone, because next time, I'll kill everyone.
And so the story of Beyond Two Souls is a non-linear narrative where you play as a girl named Jodie from at some points as young as like 10 years old up through her 20s, who is bound and tethered physically to this incorporeal entity that is, she refers to as Aiden. And because of her, otherworldly connection to this other soul, this other spirit that is attached to her, she is the subject of experimentation and research by scientists, mainly the scientist portrayed by Willem Dafoe. And so the game chronicles her life from her youth and time spent on like military bases as a research subject to her adult life, where she sort of runs away and lives a sort of vagabond lifestyle. There's sections of the game where she's experiencing homelessness and various. The game is told in like vignettes that are all non-linear, but then throughout the game there's a sort of timeline, and in each chapter it will sort of be like, here we are on the timeline in relation to these other chapters that have already happened. And so the gameplay of the game is mostly, simple puzzle solving and things, and then using Aiden to manipulate objects, and things like that. And then player choice, of course, is very integral to the story. David Cage and Quantic Dream is a very touchy and problematic subject for a lot of people in gaming. A lot of the more trad type gamers think that this shit isn't video games. They think that it's just a movie that you decide things in. It shouldn't count. On the other hand, the games are often criticized because of the way that female characters are treated in the games. In this game, Jodie, suffers a lot, and there is something to be said about the trope of having women suffer in art to make us feel sorry for them, to give us sympathy, and the idea that women can only be, powerful or triumphant if they're overcoming some sort of oppression or trauma or something like that. And so this game features, like I said, homelessness, sexual assault, physical assault, lots of bad, sad, nasty things. But it tells this really, for my money, emotional and intense and intricate and moving story, where when I played this game, I had never cried playing a video game before. But this game moved me that much. It just really emotionally resonated with me. So I don't necessarily think this game is for everyone. I have found that people who are more casual gamers, people who don't play a lot, have liked this game a lot because it's not as traditional. It might surprise you, and it's not reliant on skill and gameplay to enjoy it. So yeah, I think that's something cool about it. This game is available digitally on the PS4 and on Steam. Quantic Dream has moved away from being a PlayStation exclusive, and they ported all their games to Steam. Oh, I forgot. Also, another reason why people don't like Quantic Dream and David Cage is because there was this big lawsuit about sexual harassment in the workplace at Quantic Dream, which is very not good. and a lot of things came out about the culture at Quantic Dream and how women were treated, which was very bad. And there's a lot of sexual harassment and not good. And then David Cage handled it in a very unprofessional, uncool way, which was also not good. To the point where I question whether I want to continue supporting him and his games in the future, even though I love them so much. I think I'll have to wait and see and decide, later. They have made one game since this one, Detroit Become Human, which I liked and enjoyed, even though, again, a lot of people didn't like it a lot for a lot of the same reasons they didn't like Beyond Two Souls. It takes place in a near future Detroit where robots with artificial intelligence have become ubiquitous, and then it's an allegory for slavery. Maybe a little more on the nose, that game, maybe a little heavy-handed. I think that's a fair criticism of it, but anyways. Let's move on to 2015. September 2015, to be precise. Undertale. So I played Undertale when it came out in 2015, and I loved it. I really loved it. But I was also at a time in my life where I was very fucked up. It was when I was living in New York, and there was a lot of things going on in my life that were not great, and I was probably like the most emotionally detached from myself and numb and just broken that I've ever been in my life. And so then last summer during the pandemic, I decided to play Undertale again. And I don't know what it was about playing it again, but it just shattered me. In a way that almost no art does. Like the really, really, really good stuff that like really gets you, where it's like what I imagine people who have religious experiences where like the Holy Spirit overtakes their body. That's what I imagine this sort of experience was like for me. And so when I say that it's my favorite video game, that's why. It's a game that has a lot of caveats and baggage to go with it. It's a very popular game, and it has a very big and active fandom, and the fandom for the game sucks and is awful, and I hate them. I hate people who like this game, and I hate the memes, I hate the culture, I hate the metal covers of all of the soundtrack. It just sucks. I hate all of it. I hate the fan animations. It's bad. But the game itself is unimpeachable, in my opinion. It is perfect to me. Toby Fox, the man who made the game, he on release described it as a niche game that would only appeal to certain gamers, and he thought that it was a solid 8 out of 10 game. And I think that him describing his own game in that way tells you almost everything you need to know about him as a person and his philosophies behind game design. Toby Fox designed, programmed the entire game himself. He wrote the whole thing himself. He wrote all of the over 100 tracks of original music and performed it himself. He also did around 70% of the art for the game and character design, and just all one-man operation, plunking away in Game Maker Studio. And he created one of the greatest things ever. It's interesting in this sort of more current age of indie gaming, starting in the mid-2000s and going forward, of the one-man game being a thing. You've got earlier examples like Cave Story and Yume Nikki, but then you've got bigger, more recent, huge successes like Undertale or like Stardew Valley, where the game is just entirely the work of one person who spends years of their life just slaving away to make this thing. So, there are a few things that I have like as deep of an emotional connection to as Undertale. And it's a little silly because, you know, I talk about how I don't really like fantasy that much, and Undertale is a fantasy game. In broad strokes, the plot of the game revolves around a world that is inhabited by both monsters and humans, and after a war between the two, the monsters are sealed away underground behind this mountain with a magical barrier that keeps them from escaping. And over the years, human children have fallen through this hole in the mountain into the underworld, where the king of the monsters then takes their soul, and once he collects 7 human souls, he'll be able to break the barrier to free his people. And you play as a child who falls into the underworld and must make your way through the underworld to Asgore the king and confront him. And you meet many people and go through many interesting locales along the way. So, Toby Fox, before making this game, he was a very prominent member of 2 different fan communities on the internet. He was a major part of the Homestuck community, which is a webcomic, a very famous webcomic, also known for its very intense and toxic fan base that probably isn't representative of the work itself. And he made a lot of original music for Homestuck that was used in the comic. Is sort of a multimedia comic, so it was used in the comic. And then he also was a part of the Earthbound or Mother community, which game I mentioned earlier. He was very active in that. He did some Earthbound ROM hacks fan games when he was a young dude, and music inspired by Earthbound's soundtrack as well. And so Undertale is very very obviously indebted to Earthbound in the Mother series. And its tone is very similar. Its balance of humor and seriousness is very similar. But the thing that makes Undertale unique, its sort of elevator pitch, is that every fight in the game, you can either fight, traditional, and kill the enemy, or you can interact with them, talk with them, and if you do the right things, then you can end the fight peacefully. And every fight in the game can be ended peacefully, if you so choose. And how you decide to play the game will alter the outcome of the story, with a neutral route, a pacifist route, and then what's referred to as the genocide route. And what the game is about, I mean, there's the story, of obviously the surface level story, but what the game is really about is about choosing how we choose to be. It's a very meta-textual examination of games, where the idea of saving and loading and experience points and leveling are integral to the plot of the game. It is about questioning why we choose to do the things we do in video games, because the default action in an RPG like this is find everything you can, murder it until you level up, right? You don't ever give consideration to who these things or people are that you're fighting or why. It's just, how do I kill this, right? And Undertale is a game where you can do that if you want, but if you choose to understand people, if you choose to learn about who they are and get to know them and befriend them, you will be rewarded. And there's something really beautiful about that. Most of the things that I really love, really deeply, like this, are very cynical. I'm a very cynical person. My favorite movies, are often tinged with horror and despair, and my favorite music is often depressing and morose. But Undertale is an extremely uplifting story. It's an extremely awe-inspiring story about the power of, and this is going to sound real dumb, the power of friendship and love to save us. And, last summer we were all having a hard time, not to play the pity party, but I think I was having maybe a harder time than a lot of people. I had a lot of different things in my life all kind of fall apart in quick succession, and then reached a point where I was like, wow, this is the worst time of my life. I have reached rock bottom, and I cannot possibly imagine how my life could get worse than this. And then the pandemic happened. And in that time, especially in that time, it was the early time, the April through October time, where it was like really lockdown, where like there was a month where I didn't go outside for like a full 30 days. I didn't leave my house. And it was in that time, my loneliest, most isolated, traumatic, bottom of the rope, just ready to give up time, that I replayed Undertale, and it reminded me of all of the reasons that being alive is worthwhile. I'm getting choked up talking about it because I'm a fucking loser. And all of this is not even to say like how great of a story it is, how unbelievably good the music is, the greatest game soundtrack ever made, I think. How amazing the characters are, just so distinct and brilliant. How funny this game is, just consistently makes you laugh out loud over and over and over. And how heartbreaking and piercing and real this game is. Just there's nothing else like it. And Toby's working on his follow-up, Deltarune, which is related to Undertale, but is not a sequel. And it's being released episodically. He released the first episode in 2018, and then released the second episode just last month in September. And there is going to be 7 total episodes. And so, Deltarune has not moved me, shook me in the way that Undertale did. But at the same time, we're only 2 episodes into the 7-episode story. There's plenty of time for things to happen. And it is wonderful, despite it not being at the level of Undertale for me yet. I cannot articulate how important this game is to me. And it's one of those things where I really feel like if you play this game, you will understand me a little bit better. Maybe. This game is available on Steam for $10, and it is on the Switch and the PS4, 5, and the Xbox One XS digitally, all for, I believe, $15 on consoles. Very readily available game. We've got 2 more. Next one, I'm doing these chronologically, but like I said, US chronologically. So this was first released in America in an English translation in 2015, but it was originally published in Japan in 2009, and that is Steins Gate. Steins Gate is one of the most critically acclaimed, beloved animes of the last 10 years. Is a very popular anime, well-known anime, and it's a 1-season anime, but even though the anime is very popular, it is an adaptation of the game. And a lot of people don't know that because the anime came out in 2011 and was released in America 4 years before the game was. Now, the game, I say game. What this is a genre of game called visual novel. So think like how I was describing earlier, the way that Beyond Two Souls is sort of a style of game that's sort of like a very cinematic game that's less about gameplay and more about choice. Imagine that, but if it was, there is no gameplay at all, it is just text with visual accompaniment, and then periodically you will make a choice that will direct the route of the game. A lot of people don't think this is a game. People don't think this is a video game. I think it is. You play it on a video game console. So who cares? Why is it important that we decide if something is or is not a game? I think it doesn't matter. And I love visual novels. Visual novels are very much not a part of the mainstream in video games. There have been a few instances of them sort of crossing over and becoming maybe slightly more popular. There was an indie game released a couple years ago called Doki Doki Literature Club, which originally came out on Steam, on PC, but has since made its way to consoles. That is a visual novel horror game that is sort of a parody deconstruction of the sort of classic tropes of the visual novel style, which was very popular for a visual novel. But so in visual novels, a lot of them follow the sort of dating sim path where you will play as a main character who goes into some sort of situation where there is, a harem of potential suitors, and your choices will determine which one you will focus on, and then you will romance them or whatever and see the game out to its conclusion with that character. And then, the fans, the true fans, will go back and then play through it again for each different character because it's a different story, and you get to know each character differently and better. And a lot of the times the games will have like a main path, an OTP, one true pairing, that will be like the definitive final main route of the game. A game like Clannad, which is a very, very legendary, acclaimed visual novel, which also has a very acclaimed legendary anime adaptation, has all these different, dating possibilities, but then the main one, is what propels you through to the end of the game. And there's a little bit of that in Steins Gate as well. There is some ability to focus on different routes, focused on different characters, but they aren't dating routes. And there is also a OTP main route that is the route for the game. Okay, I've talked enough about what a visual novel is. What is Steins Gate?
ねえねえオカリン、起きているのに夢を見たことってある？
おいそこの貴様、俺たちが見えているか？ここが未来ガジェット研究所だ。所属研究員を紹介しておこう。まずはラボメンナンバー001。お？ラボ創設者にして狂気のマッドサイエンティスト。どうした？消えてるバナナが。この俺、王隠居。オ
カリンの方が可愛いのに。
黙れ。そもそも電子レンジと電話をつなげたものでタイムマシンが生まれたもの。
タイムマシンじゃない。
本日12時頃、東京千代田区秋葉原に墜落した人工衛星と思われる落下物です。
あれは何かの間違いよ。タイムマシンなんて存在するのはとんでも科学の世界だけ。
上州よ、お前は科学者として D メールを使い過去を変えられるかどうか確かめたくはないのか。
これまでの実験の結果からして D メールは過去に送られていることが実証され、タイムパラドックスが気になるのか。
過去を変えるなんてなんか卑怯な感じがするから。私の人生はたかだか18年だけど改変なんかしたくない。
ヒューマンイズデッド。ミスマッチ。
何？
ハッキングした時に出てきたメールの一部だ。
これ事実だとしたらマジ国家機密級だって。
考えてみろ。相手はセル。レポートは40年以上も隠されてきたトップシークレットだぞ。
ここまで来てビビってるの？
マユリ。マユリ！
ああ、オカリン。何？
いいから一緒に来るんだ。走れ！全力で走るんだ。
嘘には2種類ある。人を傷つける嘘と優しい嘘。
これこそがシュタインズゲートの選択。
今日
お前たちの正体は。
岡部、本当に大丈夫？
いいのか、これ以上 D メールを使っても過去を改変してもいいのか。
逃げたって苦しくなるだけよ。
うるさい。
何度タイムリープしたって 1% の壁は越えられない。
やってみなきゃわからないだろう。
Steins Gate is a time travel story. A time travel love story. Let's say. Which is probably a terrible way to describe it. If someone told me it was a time travel love story, I would not want to play it. You play as a young man, 19-year-old man named Okabe Rintaro, who has passions and aspirations to become an evil scientist, a mad genius, to take over the world. And he and his two friends, Daru and Mayuri, are members of what he has dubbed Future Gadget Laboratories, which is a shitty apartment above a CRT TV store where they make mostly useless inventions. And one day, when they are testing out their recent invention, the phone wave, which is a microwave attached to a cell phone, which you can then call with a different phone to make it microwave things, they accidentally send a banana back in time and figure out that they have created a time machine. They don't understand exactly how they have done this or why. That is revealed as the story progresses. Into the picture comes a young girl, Japanese-born but raised in America, named Makise Kuruso, who is a sort of wunderkind scientist whose disgraced father is a sort of obsessive with time travel, and she has this secret passion for it as well because of her, fraught relationship with her father and her desire to appease him and impress him. And so she comes into the fold to help them sort of understand what's happening, and very quickly things start to get spicy and out of control as various entities who are vying for control over the time machine to enact their various nefarious deeds to control the world are making plays and trying to do that. And Okabe is forced to, through sort of trial and error, through traveling through time, stop them from doing this. All the while falling in love with Makise, of course. So this game has tons of tropes that I really love. Conspiracies, secret societies, complex narratives. It's very firmly rooted in its love of otaku culture. The Okabe is sort of this ultimate sort of trying as hard as he can to be an anime villain, but it's all sort of a facade to sort of cover up how sad and broken he actually is. Daru is the ultimate NEET. He's obsessed with his 2D women in his dating simulators, and he's overweight and slovenly and whatever. And then Mayuri is a professional cosplayer and obsessed with all things cute and kawaii and parts of the game will take place on things that are replicas of 2channel, which is the Japanese predecessor to 4chan. And the whole game takes place in Akihabara, which is the very tech and video game and otaku centered neighborhood in Tokyo. I'm not a big romance guy. I don't love, usually, romance stories. There are some notable exceptions. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a favorite of mine, for sure. And then this is another very good example. Because what the game becomes about is, as he is trying to save the world, he's sort of pitted where he reaches this point where, you know, he's trying to change what happens by traveling through time, but he can't make everything happen the way he wants to. And basically reaches a point where he realizes that two very important people in his life, depending on what he does, one of them is going to die. And he cannot figure out how to save them both. And it's interesting because it's a game that's supposed to be about saving the world, but it's really about saving yourself and your friends and your love. And because that's what makes the world worth living in, right? They made a sequel to this game, which was also adapted into an anime called Steins Gate Zero. Came out a number of years later, came out in 2018. And Steins Gate Zero is an interesting sequel because it's not really a sequel. There's a point in Steins Gate where Okabe reaches that point where he can't save everyone. And he is like, I have to resign myself to failing. There's nothing I can do. And at that moment, he receives a call from the future, from himself, from like 30 years in the future. And it's a version of himself who continued from that point, having given up, having lost everything, having failed, who lived this life plagued by trauma and PTSD and guilt and intense cynicism and nihilism. And then he overcame that after many, many, many years and decided, no, there is a way, we're going to make it happen. And so he makes this call through time to change the world from the one that he lived. Steins Gate Zero is the story of that man. The game picks up right at that moment, the moment where Okabe decides that he has failed. And we play out the following year or so of his life, where he largely is going through very intense grief, where he is very broken and unable to be a real person. And then through the process of the story of Steins Gate Zero, learns to heal and become whole again. Beautiful story. Really interesting concept for a sequel because it's not canonical. But it so is, and it adds so much to the story. This is another game that just made me cry like a fucking baby. And just has such a deep and resonant and incredibly emotional and rewarding story to be told. Playing through all the routes will take you probably around 30 hours, and it's all reading. So that's it's a long book, right? If you read a page a minute, 60 pages an hour times 30, you get the idea. I really can't, again, put into words how much I love this story. And you know, I've got some weeb tendencies, and like my OTP is Okabe and Makise. Just it's such a perfect pair. I think that one sort of barrier to entry for this is you aren't going to appreciate this as much if you aren't familiar with anime and manga tropes and things. Like Makise is styling herself as a tsundere. She's trying as hard as she can to be a tsundere, and it's not working, you know, and Makise and Okabe sort of similar. They're both, you know, trying to be these archetypes to hide their true feelings and intentions. And I don't think you would appreciate that as much if you don't know the history of what they're trying to do. One criticism levied against this game a lot is its treatment of gender and trans issues. There is a character in this game named Luca, who is a boy who dresses and appears very femininely, dresses in women's clothing, but does identify as a boy. But then through the course of tinkering with time, Okabe manages to change history in a way that makes Luca into actually a girl. She looks the same, but is biologically female. And then there's sort of a moment where the implication is kind of that, like, their dream is to be a woman, but they have to give that up in order to save the world, or the world can't be its perfect timeline with that being the reality. It's a little convoluted. I absolutely understand where people are coming from calling this problematic. It is problematic. I think it's just really, it's indicative of how Japanese culture treats LGBTQ people, which is not great and very different from Western society. And this also came out in 2009. And, you know, it's only been 12 years, but, like, I think our understanding of transgender issues has leapt forward a lot in 12 years. So, you know, maybe hasn't aged perfectly in that respect. So that's a caveat to keep in mind. I will say the anime adaptation, you know, it's very beloved, and deservedly so. It is absolutely a great adaptation. It does great justice to the story. But the visual novel is better. It is better. It is just better. If the story sounds intriguing to you, the ideal way to experience it is through the visual novel. I implore you. I know it's going to be so much easier to go on Funimation or Crunchyroll or wherever it is streaming and just watch the anime. But reading the visual novel is the best way to go about doing this. And there's even kind of a compromise now, too, where just recently, I think last year, they released Steins Gate Elite for the Switch, which is the full text, the full original text of the visual novel, but it replaces the original still 2D imagery of the visual novel with footage from the anime, fully animated, with voice acting. This provides to me like a definitive experience for the story. You know, you're going to get a more evocative visual aspect to the game because you've got the fully animated footage, but you've still got the full text with all the extra stuff, deeper character explorations and things of the original text. And that's on Switch. You can get a physical copy of it. I bought one last year for like $25 on eBay. And then the original US release of the game was on Vita, which is how I originally played it, and PS3, PS4, and Steam. And so, yeah, you can get it on Steam as well. So, Steam, Switch, whatever floats your boat. And final game. Another one that is a bit of a controversial pick, because a lot of people didn't like this game for a lot of different reasons, and I think all of them are wrong. And that is The Last of Us Part 2, released in 2020, last year. So, Naughty Dog is a game developer owned by Sony, who develops games for the PlayStation. They created the Crash Bandicoot games for the PS1, and then they created the Jak and Daxter games for the PS2, and then they did the Uncharted games starting on the PS3. But also on the PS3, they started another franchise, The Last of Us, which is a zombie survival horror narrative-driven game where the world is destroyed by this fungal plague. They're fungus zombies, so they're infected by spores that over time mutate and destroy the body of the human host, and functionally they act basically like zombies, just that the longer they've been infected, the more sort of fucked up and dangerous they are, to the point where the really fucked up ones are referred to as clickers because of this sort of weird clicking noise that their throats make. They're completely blind at that point, but they're much more dangerous. Story of The Last of Us, the original one, revolves around a man who is Joel. In the opening of the game, we experience the beginnings of the outbreak from his perspective, and I don't want to give it away. It's the opening of the game, so it's not like you're gonna have this happen quickly, but something bad happens, let's just say, and it really fucks Joel's shit up forever. Flash forward to 20 years later. Joel is middle-aged, in his 50s now, and he's sort of an on-again, off-again courier worker for this group of rebels called the Fireflies, who are sort of resisting the oppressive local government of post-apocalyptic America. The Fireflies find this young teenage girl named Ellie, who has been bitten and infected but has not turned, and so therefore poses the possibility for a cure to this world-ending thing, this event. And so they entrust Joel with the task of smuggling her across the continental United States to a research laboratory on the West Coast, where they'll hopefully be able to use Ellie to cure the virus, the plague. The Last of Us was known for not only being a really good game to play and enjoyable in its gameplay, but having a really good, deep, emotional, resonant story. And it does, absolutely. I remember, I binged this game the way that people binge TV. When it came out, I played through the whole thing within 36 hours of its release, and it's like 12 hours long. I was like up all night playing it, just engrossed completely with the story. And the ending is very riveting and shocking and upsetting. And I'm not going to spoil it. And it set us up for, where are we going to go from here? And so, 7 years later, we got The Last of Us Part 2.
I know you wish things were different. I wish things were different. Ellie! But they ain't.
Please stop.
I'm leaving tomorrow.
To do this smart, we'd be leaving Jackson vulnerable.
So they just get to get away with this?
How'd you find us?
You can't stop this.
I want what you want. But not at any cost. I really hope you make it.
I have to finish it.
There's a cost.
We could have killed you. Maybe you should have.
And this game upset a lot of people when it came out. A lot of people called it, a lot of the Gamergate people called it like SJW, diversity, whatever. A lot of people really didn't like some of the narrative choices that Naughty Dog made with the sequel. I'm gonna do everything I can not to spoil anything, because there's some really crazy shit that happens, especially in the opening couple hours of the second Last of Us. But for the most part, I will say that you are not playing as Joel anymore in the second game. You're playing at the outset as Ellie, and it takes place maybe 5 years after the conclusion of the first game. Ellie has gone from being a teenager to a young adult, early 20s. And let's just say that something happens, and Ellie takes it upon herself to set out on a quest cross-country to do something. Whatever. I'm not going to say much. The thing that happens that is the inciting incident people didn't like, and then the other thing people really didn't like, is that halfway you play through the game and you do all of these things. You fight and you kill all of these people, these enemies. You're going after one specific person, this woman named Abby. You're trying to find Abby, and on your path to finding her, you're killing all of her, friends and comrades and stuff. And then you reach a pivotal point at the story, and then it flips, and it goes back to the beginning, and then you play the rest of the game as Abby, the villain, the antagonist of the story. And people really didn't like that. People really didn't like that. People didn't like people were like, I think a lot of people, the general consensus was like, I just spent 10 hours, hating and wanting to kill this person, and now you expect me to care about and sympathize with them and their plights in life, and etc., etc. I think that's a really smooth brain kind of take. And I think it exposes people for having very simplistic sort of conceptions of story and, what a hero and a villain are. Very black and white kind of thinking. Because what it does is when you play through the game as Abby and you experience all of those events that you just enacted from her perspective, you get to know all those people that you murdered. And you know that you murdered them. And you get to know them, and while you're getting to know them, you know that they're going to die. And it's a very unique and interesting and upsetting narrative convention that I had never experienced before. It was so fascinating to get to know that other side, and to, you spend all this time with this sort of frame of mind. Ellie is the hero, the protagonist. Abby is the villain, the antagonist. Then you flip it and you see it from the other perspective. And it's like, I think it's one of the most effective. I think in recent times, the idea of like the anti-hero or like the gray hero or whatever has been pretty well established. But I think this game does it like really, 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 really well. And the idea that like, people are too complex to be the hero or the villain or the good guy or the bad guy. Like, we're all the protagonist of our own game, our own story, right? But like, who the villain is going to depend from which perspective you're looking at it from. And in that, I think it has some of the best storytelling that video gaming has ever had, ever. There's definitely a lot of things that you can criticize the game for. Nakey Jakey, the YouTuber, who hasn't made a video in a year, hope he's doing well. His most recent video was about this game. It was called Naughty Dog's Game Design is Outdated. And a lot of the criticism that he levied against the game, I felt like was valid. Though he was, I think, of the camp where like he felt like it was a bad call to have us try to empathize with and understand Abby. But I think that maybe it's because I'm a lot more interested in how stories work and why we feel the things we do when we experience them, that I loved this game so much. I think that there's absolutely a case to be made for how the first Last of Us is a better game. It's maybe a more satisfying story. Joel is a really great protagonist. And part of the thing that I think people really like about Joel is that he's so likable and relatable that when he does questionable things, we think about it because, we want to like Joel, even though he does things that make us want to not like him sometimes. And one thing I think that is missing from the second game, where Ellie and Abby both are not very likable. But they are both products of their trauma. And that's an interesting story for me. And as great as Last of Us 1 is, I like Last of Us 2 more, but you need Last of Us 1 to make Last of Us 2 work. If you're interested in this, you have to play the first one first. Is not an option. It would be like starting Lord of the Rings with the Two Towers. It just wouldn't work. The first Last of Us remastered is available on the PlayStation 4. I think you can get used copies of it at GameStop for like $3. And then the second one is also on the PlayStation 4. So if you have a PlayStation 4, you can play both of these games. I did not think it was going to take this long to talk about all these games, but they're all things I love so much I shouldn't be surprised. Some of these games I could talk for this long about just on their own. I think that people maybe don't value the way that video games and books, which is what the original focus of this channel was, are similar. You've got, some pretty standard parallels when you look at something like Steins Gate, a visual novel that's almost entirely text-based. It's called a visual novel, right? It's like a comic, right? It's words and pictures, and it's I wonder what the word count. What's the word count for Steins Gate? 620,000 words. Steins Gate. It's longer than Infinite Jest. But even other things like the Persona games that have a lot of text in them, same sort of level of word count. Like, for instance, looks like Persona 3 has 340,000 words. It's, that's pretty significant. That's a big book, right? And they present the ability to tell these very big, very complex, very intricate narratives in the way that books do as well. And I think that's, something that maybe people don't think about as much with video games, because the most popular video games aren't usually, they're not story-driven games. Things like Fortnite and Minecraft, they're not narrative focused. They're entirely gameplay focused. But the narrative possibilities of video gaming is infinite, and it's a young medium. We're still learning and innovating and creating and pushing boundaries and seeing what is possible with these games. Things like how Undertale uses the conventions of video game structures to be this metatextual plot point, and how it incorporates data mining, hiding lore about the game in the file structure of the program on your computer. Similarly, Doki Doki Literature Club, I mentioned earlier, there's a part in that game where you have to go and delete files in the game on your computer in order to progress the game forward. Just the ability to think outside the box like that and push the boundaries of narrative and interaction in fascinating ways is so lovely. And the ability that choice making has on narrative. A lot of games with decision making systems are kind of shallow. I think that's really exemplified by the Mass Effect games, which I love dearly, but the decision making in those games is kind of, weak a little bit. But then you've got something like Undertale, where you get these vastly different endings depending on how you play. I think that if you don't play video games but you are interested in storytelling, you're doing yourself a disservice. Don't say, like, I'm too old for video games. It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Are you too old to listen to music? Come on. You should never be too old to look for new art. And you should never let yourself get comfortable. You should always be trying to push yourself to see new things, to see the avant-garde, what is at the front line. Because that's where the magic happens, baby. And you're just doing yourself a disservice by not being there to experience it. Yeah, that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching.